So then, in our last video, we went over the Megahouse Neko Musume figure from GeGeGe no Kitaro, but there's something else in this box that we need to go over as well. So, let's turn it over and do that now. I'm pretty excited about this one because today we are going over the slayer of evil yokai himself, GeGeGe no Kitaro. This is the main character, the half yokai himself who slays other bad yokai. I can't say much more about him. He's the reason the series is named GeGeGe no Kitaro, because it's about him. And I absolutely love this character, so I'm excited to see how good this looks in a Megahouse figure. Now, similar to Neko Musume, the front of the box appears to be sort of like a graveyard with the moon at the top and some spirit orbs on the side. Very cool with the window display. You can actually see Kitaro in there, though he is in a bit of plastic, so it's kind of hard to tell. The top of the box just has his name and some branding on it. Now, of course, next to the branding for the show, we get to see the silver Toei sticker, which acts sort of like a seal of authenticity, and also that this figure is part of their G.E.M series. The side is a very bright yellowish orange, which looks really great with all of the Japanese text, the spirit orbs, and of course Kitaro himself at the bottom with his crow on his arm. The other side is very similar, like with Neko Musume. It's all the same stuff, but of course there's actually the different option of him switching out his head, and as well as his crow still coming onto his arm. And besides the legal information on the back, we get to see all these different forms, and of course a front and back shot of Kitaro on the back with some branding as well. Now, part of me thinks this is sort of funny, but I'm also kind of irritated about this. This is the one negative so far that I can say, is that inside of here, you can hear something. You can't really see it in the corner, but there is something else rattling around inside. Now, that piece is included if you buy both Kitaro and Neko Musume, and it's just a little bonus figure that's included in the set. I thought it would come wrapped in bubble wrap, but it's literally in the box for Kitaro, and it's very loose, and it's just rattling around, and it could be getting scratched, so let's open it up and free it. There it is. So similar to Neko Musume, we have this really cool insert for the box, which has the sort of night sky and the graveyard background. But as you can see, there's also this little baggie here, which is just taped onto the back board here. This, I would assume, is where Sunekosuri was supposed to be, but it obviously fell out. So that is a bit of a problem, but I guess it's at least good to know that it wasn't supposed to just be rattling around in there. And this is the piece that I was talking about, Sunekosuri, which is actually itself another yokai. A very cute little cat, which I actually had an encounter with this particular yokai while I was in Kyoto, Japan. I'm not even joking, I'm going to have to detail this as its own story, but this little figure is a really cute inclusion, and I am happy that it's there. It's just a simple little figure, it doesn't have any articulation whatsoever. It even has little paw pads on its feet, which is adorable. The bell, all the details on the face are very well done. It's a great little figure, but, you know, I mean, they could have not given us anything, so I do appreciate it, but it is just this tiny little thing that you could attach to the regular bases for the other figures. Now, Kitaro is in this crazy plastic blister, which keeps him very safe, but of course we can see he is much smaller in size, especially with his base because of the way that he stands, so I'm actually already kind of liking this, even though it is a bit smaller in scale. And well protected indeed he was. Here is Kitaro looking great right out of the packaging. No issues, no QC problems, and no scratches. He was in there very securely, even with some plastic around him inside of the blister. So he looks great. And yeah, let's plug him into his base, because this one actually does have peg holes on the bottom of his geta, which is going to plug into his base. Unlike with Neko Musume, hers was just a flat base where you can kind of just sit her on top of it. This one, you actually do need to plug him in. So I don't really like that as much, but it will at least let him to stand more steadily and firmly, so there's that. It may be very hard to see, but if you can take a look at the peg holes, attached to each one seems to be this tiny little line. You can really only see it when I reflect some light into the base. That, to me, looks like the plastic possibly blistering, but I don't know, I could be wrong, but yeah, if you get in there with a really fine-tooth comb and check that out, it doesn't look that great. But the base looks fine from afar. You're not going to see that unless you get in there with a fine-tooth comb, so that's that. But there was also something on my base. I'm not quite sure if that's tape residue, maybe from the bag for Sunekosuri, but it's kind of gross, and I don't know if it's going to come off. It's a little sticky. And now that he's on his base, we can actually take a good look at him, and man, up close, this thing looks wonderful. I'll say the details are even nicer than with Neko Musume. His sculpting is wonderful, as you can imagine, and his painting is even better, and I think that's what really brings this figure to life. The painting is so well detailed. And the details that really stick out is the shading on his clothing. It's subtle, but when you look at it really, it allows so much more depth to the figure. The fact that his chanchanko is open and flowing gives him so much more flow and dynamic, which looks so great for a figure. If he was just standing straight and his vest was just flat against his body, it would be a little bit more boring, but this allows your eye to travel more interestingly up and down the figure. This is all super important stuff when it comes to designing a figure. As far as character design and drawing and all of that stuff goes, these are things you have to take into account, and Kitaro here is very well balanced for the way that he was designed. For what his original price was, anywhere between $50 and $70 depending on where you picked him up from, I think you were getting your money's worth, but certainly for some people that might be more than they might want to spend on a figure this size. But it's not as if he's terribly sized, because the figure itself comes in just around 5 inches tall. He certainly towers over Neko Musume, who of course is a bit smaller because of the way that she's sprawled out on her base. Still, there's really not much that I can say that I don't like about the way that this figure is designed. 360 degrees around this character, you get quality every square inch of him, so I'm rather impressed with Megahouse's work on this figure. I really can't be mad. One thing I don't like, and this is usually a sore spot for me, is the hairline. Obviously enough, the hair is connected as 2 different pieces, and unfortunately because of that it creates a bit of separation, and this fracture here is a bit easy to notice from pretty much any angle you're looking at the figure, unless you're looking head on at him. But any sort of side view and you're going to see that huge fracture. But that fracture is there because his hair actually detaches. But before we go on to anything else, I want to talk about the one last detail that I don't like. If you look here at his face and his hair, you can see that there's some white lines, and I'm assuming these were used to kind of create this sort of highlighting effect, but to me it just looks like factory defects. Now I know that they're not, because him and both Neko Musume have these lines on them, and it's also in all of the pictures of their marketing. That would lead me to assume that this is a stylistic choice, and personally I just don't think it works. I really wish I could rub these white lines off, because ultimately they just kind of make it look more sloppy. It may be something that you might not notice from far away, but up close, to me, they just look like defects. And as much as I thought this figure could do no wrong, I found the one QC error that brings everything down. If we look at both of the faceplates here, of course the eyes are painted in both of them. But if you take a look at the eyes on the neutral faceplate, you'll see that he has somewhat of a line on his eye. That's because there is a divot that is sunken into the head to make it look more natural where the eyes were supposed to be painted on at, and I completely understand them trying to fit the eyes into those sockets. Now, they look fine on the happier face, but the big problem comes in with the neutral face, where you can actually see a huge line right in the middle of the white of his eyeball. This really ruins it for me, because this is one of the main focal points of the character, and this QC error, as big as it is, cannot go unnoticed. And what really sucks is that that's the main face I was probably going to pose him with. This is definitely going to cost this figure a point. But let's talk about what Kitaro comes with, because a lot like Neko Musume, he has some additional accessories, which is really awesome for a statue. Oh, it's a friendly little crow, and it happens to have a little letter in its mouth. A big part of the show is him taking care of evil yokai through the means of people sending in letters to this post box that say, "Hey, help my family, we're being bothered by what seems to be an evil spirit." So this crow included is a nice little detail, but the one thing I will say about it is that the way that it plugs in is very frightening to me. There's a very small peg hole in the bottom of the crow's foot, and plugging it in makes you kind of scratch Kitaro's arm with one of the other feet of the crow, so be very careful if you do get this, because plugging it in could potentially damage the figure. And of course, we have to consider that a small peg like that could very easily break off over time, because we've seen me already break several other plastic fittings, because over time they deteriorate and they get weaker. So be very careful with that, because it's a very exact fitting. But it looks great. The crow looks good, the detail's fine, there's really not too much painting on it because it's a crow, and yeah, I feel like all the sculpting itself does all the work needed. Now in addition to that, I already talked about how you can take his hair off of his face. And as we can see, Kitaro only has one eye, and that's actually true. And once that's removed, you can attach another hair piece which actually has Medama Oyaji-san inside of his hair. This is appreciated because that's of course his dad inside of his hair, and he is an important character to the series. Yes, his dad is just an eyeball. So Kitaro seems to be in somewhat of a better mood with his father around. As you can see, he's a bit more smiling, and his gaze is of course diverted to his dad on top of his head. I think this is cute. I like this. I appreciate this being included with the figure. Though I will say I wish that he came with a separate arm, so that maybe he could not always have the crow. Especially if you're going to have him with Medama Oyaji-san inside of his hair. Maybe you could just have another arm where he's got maybe his hand on his hip, or just his hand out to his side or something like that. That would be fine. But all in all, I love this Kitaro figure. This is certainly what I was looking for out of the set. I was more excited, of course, to receive Kitaro than I was Neko Musume. With as much as I love Neko Musume, Kitaro, of course, is pretty much the reason you watch the show or read the manga. And this figure does a great job of capturing his personality and his character. With his one face being a bit more somber and kind of creepy, I love that. It gets the idea of him being a kind of creepy character that was born in a graveyard and fights monsters for a living. While the other face shows his other kinder and brighter side, where he's actually friendly and he even helps human beings despite really not needing to because of his yokai heritage. The included Sunekosuri as well as the Medama Oyaji being optional add-ons for the character just give it a little bit more life, which are really appreciated and really not entirely necessary with statues, I'll say that again. But Neko Musume and Kitaro really don't work too well as a pair of figures together because she's all sprawled out and low down, whereas her eye level is basically at Kitaro's knees, which looks really weird next to him standing just sort of neutrally. I would have preferred to see Neko Musume standing with maybe her arms crossed and looking smug. They could have still given her extra accessories, maybe her white jacket as well, but as a set, these two don't really work too well together because of how poorly they're aligned. Maybe that's a commentary on their relationship from the show. Who knows? And despite me not liking those little lines in the paint and the style of the figure, I will say that everything else here is expertly crafted and painted to a point of near perfection. Now, I'm going to be giving the GeGeGe no Kitaro figure from Megahouse a solid 9 out of 10. And it pains me to give it a 9 out of 10 because I wanted to give it a 10. I should be giving this a 10 right now, but that QC error is too much to overlook. Having one of the main focal points of the character spoiled is really a problem, and that brings it down a point. Whereas everything else is perfect. The pose is great, the dynamic of how it was designed is wonderful, the painting is phenomenal, everything here screams quality, and I am screaming in my own head that I can't give this thing a 10, but that coupled with the fact that those little weird white lines are on the hair, stylistically I don't like that either, so let's say that that point is all subtracted for those reasons. The way that it is though, I love this, and this will absolutely be going on one of my main shelves. I'm so happy to have a higher quality version of a Kitaro figure. The fact that this series is 60 years old and it's still getting this kind of love really does mean so much to me. So I'm happy to have this, and I will be keeping this one for pretty much ever. But what do you guys think? Is this figure as great as I'm making it out to seem? Do you even like Kitaro? Do you want to hear about my yokai story? Drop a comment below and like the video to let me know that you did enjoy this. As you know, I make figure reviews every week, so come back next week for another one. Click what I'm putting on the screen because it does help the channel either way. Join the Discord if you want some Kingu stickers, and I'll see you guys next week. But until then, have an amazing weekend and keep on collecting.